So hello and welcome. I'm Frederick Dunn, and today I've got a very slow moving bee video for you. We're looking at something that seems pretty ordinary. Now this video is 43 minutes long, and I invite you at the end of it, or at any time actually, to look down into the video description and you'll find a link to part 2. But I'm going to explain what we're looking at, and it's not what you might think. So we're looking at a bivouac of honeybees. And of course around this tree just happened to be at a convenient height for me to make this video. And this is a very high resolution video. So what's going on is there are a bunch of bees on the branch. Now normally in September we have our second round of swarms in the apiary. For those of you who don't know, an apiary is where we keep multiple beehives and where we manage bees. When honeybees reproduce as a superorganism, as an entire colony, normally the queen that's resident to that colony will fly out with a bunch of colony members. And then you'll see them temporarily land on fence posts, trees, tree branches, which is what's being shown here. This is an evergreen tree. And at that point, usually people get on social media or they reach out to their beekeeping association or something like that and say, come and get this swarm. But what I'm going to explain to you here is that this is not a normal swarm of bees. And it answers a lot of questions that I've had through my years of beekeeping. And often people will get themselves a queen, or they'll be manipulating a hive, making a split or something like that, and then they're handling a queen honeybee that's been mated, or maybe even a virgin queen, and she can fly off. Sometimes people purchase a queen through the mail. And no matter what the source is, when a queen honeybee comes through the mail, she is mated. Sometimes they send her with some attending workers that will make sure to feed the queen. And then you're going to introduce that queen into a colony of bees, hopefully that's queenless, so that they'll accept her. And what happens then is they start to spread her pheromone throughout the colony. They have to do that with direct contact. That's why sometimes when you see a queen cage that's containing the queen that you've purchased, there's a candy plug. The candy plug entices the bees, the workers, to come and lick away at that sweetness so they can work their way into the queen and slow release her. And the reason they do it slow is because they have to get her pheromone spread throughout the colony so that the bees will accept and attend to the queen. Of course, hopefully she'll start laying eggs, and the future of that colony of bees is guaranteed at that point. That is not what's going on here. I've always wondered, when a queen goes out by herself, in other words, is she lost? Bees are social. Honeybees cannot survive on their own. So they need this organization of support. They're called eusocial insects, which means that, for example, the female workers that we're looking at here all have the ability to activate their ovaries and produce eggs themselves, but they only produce drones. But because they're eusocial, they set aside that ability while the pheromone of a queen is present, and instead they attend to the queen, and she becomes the only egg producer in the colony. Now what we're looking at here is a cluster of bees on a tree branch, and they're in the thousands. Look at the size of it. If you look at the lower left portion of your screen, you see a piece of wood. So what I did, because I'm in close proximity to a lot of beehives here, I decided to do a pheromone test of my own. And I've learned through the years that you can put a queen mandibular pheromone out on a tree branch, and the honeybees will just start to collect on it. Now there's no queen. It is a pheromone by itself. So they'll collect, and you can even get a cluster of several pounds of honeybees with no queen present. So then the question is, where did all these bees come from? Well, in this particular apiary, there are over 30 colonies of bees. There is something called bee drift. And what happens is foragers head out, even drones head out that are produced in these colonies, and those are the male bees. They're apt to land on any other landing board in the apiary or even in the area that they come across during their travels while foraging. And for the drones, they fly and land on landing boards and are for some reason welcomed into any hive, any colony that they seem to visit, and then they're fed, and then they move on. So because there's drift, and some other researchers, people that have published scientific documents on the number of bees that are non-resident yet present in a colony can vary widely. So what I mean by that is, if we had a colony of bees, and we had a queen, and we had thousands of workers, the baseline of how many workers you need to run a full colony and for them to do all the jobs in there is 5,000 bees. And when you have that, one of the research papers that I was reading said that approximately 20% of a colony of bees may not be from that resident queen. So that means that they're just landing on the landing boards and visiting one another and becoming a part of colonies, and they're not faithful to their own queen. So with that knowledge, I decided, well, we know that I can put the QMP lures out, queen mandibular pheromone, and I can put that out on a tree branch, and I'll get a cluster of bees on it. And that led me to wonder if, for example, what if I bought in a mated queen, and instead of putting a queen mandibular pheromone lure on a tree branch, what if, and this is key, what if during the period of swarming, which here in the northeastern United States, the month of September is another swarm month because we have lots of nectar available in the environment, and that coincides with brood buildup, and brood buildup coincides with splitting of colonies. So let's fast forward and see what I did. Well, I took a risk. I bought in a mated queen, and she was flown in from the Oliveras breeders there in California, and a Carniolan Queen showed up in a queen cage, which is pretty standard. And the stick that you saw previously in the lower left actually has a mated queen, not from this apiary, zip tied to the stick. And so now what you're seeing, and what I'm going to prove out, by the way, which makes this really fun and interesting. While I'm talking about this, we're seeing this cluster of bees, but they are actually clustered around a queen in her cage. That's what kicked it off. So I did a test first before I zip tied her to that stick, now that's visible on the left. I zip tied just the queen in her cage on the tree branch, and within 5 minutes, now the time of day is pretty key too. So between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., you are most likely to pick up foraging honeybees that are not related to the queen, who simply fly through her pheromone stream somehow, and they follow up on that, and they will start attending to and feeding a brand new queen that they're completely not connected to, other than the fact that they're all honeybees. So the queen on that stick to the left showed up, and what we're looking at here is a full day's worth of honeybees that just started to join the pheromone cluster here. I don't know what else to call it. And the queen can't get out of her cage. Her corks are in the entrances there, and I'm going to show you her later. In fact, you don't get to see the queen unless you watch the second part of this video. So the reason this one's 43 minutes long is I've actually condensed it. I was out here for hours, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, watching them, wanting to see what they do. And it goes through the normal progression of communication. If we look at the 2 o'clock position there, the top right corner, you see a waggle dance going on. That bee is waggling and turning to the left, waggling and turning to the right. And they're indicating places that they've found. So they think that they can fly off and get this entire swarm with the queen to go and move into another cavity of their choosing. Now I ruined that for them because the queen's in a cage. Now if she were let out of that cage, that's the interesting part, is if at this point all I did was pull the cork on the cage and release the queen into this cluster of bees in this bivouac location, they would fly away and establish themselves somewhere that would not be under my control. So instead, what I'm doing is watching them, and we're going to see if they actually try to fly away with the queen. We're going to see what happens, and I'll tell you ahead of time. They do start waggle dancing, and it turns into a flash mob, which means that bees all over the surface of this cluster start to do the same waggle dance, the same information, and they do encourage this entire cluster of bees to fly off to another location. But guess who can't go with them? The queen in the cage. So that's part 2. Don't forget, that's down in the video description very soon after this one launches, because I've already got the sequences done. I already have the resolution here. So what this proves for me is that I can get a queen that's mated. I can bring her into unfamiliar territory that's occupied by honeybees. I can set that queen out at the right time of day, at the right time of year. By the way, it has to be during peak swarming season. And I can create my own package of bees from my own apiary. And that's what I did here. There are more than enough bees. Remember I said there's a basic benchmark of about 5,000 bees necessary for a honeybee colony to function correctly. And so we have these bees here shot in extreme resolution just for you. And I made my own package, so to speak. So also in part 2, we're going to hive them. Here we go, dead center. Waggle dance going on. And remember, what we're looking for is the same waggle dance to be repeated by multiple bees. Now I had somewhere to be, so I was really racing the clock here, standing out in your yard watching these bees for hours, knowing that I have to be somewhere in the early afternoon. It was pretty frustrating because I was afraid I might miss this event. And if you notice, look how active they're getting on the surface too. They're all starting to move around. We have multiple waggle dancers going on. Look for the similarities. In other words, are they each repeating that same dance? The other thing is, you see workers moving through the group, grabbing bees and just vibrating. So it's not a dance. You don't see them turning to the right, waggling, turning to the left, waggling. They go along and they grab other bees, they put their bodies in direct contact with each other, and they vibrate them. I call those cheerleading bees. This particular one is a waggle dancer, but the cheerleaders are also going around waking up and shaking them into action because they plan to leave. And it's very interesting. You get this opportunity to stand around and just watch them. Now, there was another possibility that I had to consider. Since the cluster is so large, is it really just because there happens to be a mated queen in a cage that they've never been around before? Or was there also a swarm that had a queen with it that just happened to join up with the queen on this branch who's in the cage? And that gets answered also in the next video. So I hope that you enjoy just kind of watching them, seeing how the communication goes, watching the bees on the tree branch, seeing them sharing food and resources, by the way, which is another thing that's interesting. You'll see some trophallaxis going on. So some bees are flying out and flying back. Now, I don't know what they're bringing. They could be bringing water. They could be bringing nectar from the plants in the area. But bees do fly away, and they come back to this bivouac location. And then the bees that are static, that are stationary here and holding onto the branch and holding their position, they will stick their tongues out and get resources from that bee that's flown out and come back. The other thing is, we can look at the bees here and see that their abdomens are fully extended. These are nice, healthy bees. They have lots of honey in their crops, for example. And it is interesting because they didn't plan to swarm. In other words, they didn't do the normal workup that bees do when they swarm out of a single colony. So what we're looking at here is a collective. In other words, the workers here are from multiple different colonies. And I see that, by the way, as a really interesting advantage. And that's because these are already good foragers. These are bees that definitely have resources. They're not just here because they're starving, because there wouldn't be anything for them. So they've just come in groups, and they keep building and adding to the numbers here as that pheromone is spread through this cluster of worker honeybees. So I invite you to, and there's a cheerleader bee to the left right there, about the 9 o'clock position. You'll see her go along, grabbing different bodies and vibrating, and they spread the word that they're trying to get them active. And you see this inside the hive as well. So keep in mind that these bees can't hear, that they feel vibrations. So what they're doing is through direct contact, and of course the other communication that we're already talking about here is pheromone based. But look at all the activity now. There's a lot of movement going on here, and remember, this cluster has been here overnight. So once I strapped the queen in her cage to the stick, I made sure to watch long enough to know that there was a softball-sized cluster before we went into nightfall, because those bees need to surround the queen, keep her warm, keep her fed because she's in a cage, and the queen does not feed herself. That's what the attendant workers are for. They come with her, they'll feed the queen, keep her groomed, and keep her healthy until she gets put into a hive. So in the second part of this video, we're going to, of course, hive all of these bees, and I'm going to answer more questions, and it will not be a 43-minute video. I just think it's exciting to watch these. So knowing that that's what's going on, I'm going to stop narrating, and I'm just going to let you watch and listen, if you'd like to the rest of this video. These are in order, so the activity will change, and you'll see these behaviors, the cheerleader bees exciting the others to get them into motion, the dancing bees that are communicating information. Lower right, there's another dance going on, and if we notice, it's the same information that we saw before. So you will see them start to imitate one another's waggle dance. You'll also notice, coming along in these videos, I won't say where, but a yellow jacket wasp shows up and dives right into the center of this cluster of bees. That seemed like a pretty bold move, so I invite you to watch for that. And feel free to write down in the comment section what you observe the bees doing and why you think they're doing it. So once again, this is the end of the narration. Just watch the bees, listen, and enjoy the sight. If you want to move right on and see what happens at the end, follow the link in the video description. Thank you for being here.